first time, we ask that you turn with us to our text. Our text is found on our program, and we'll read from the King James, but we'll use different translations sometimes on our presentation. And again, God is good, and we thank God for you. Now, if it's God's will, and we will be going through the book of Job. We will not go verse by verse. We will not go chapter by chapter, but we believe that there's a message in there for us. And so we'll be doing a series from the book of Job. We've done a series here recently. But from the first chapter of Job, we want to read verses 6 through 12 and 20 and 21. We know it's quite a bit of reading, but we'll do it so we can get the gist of our thought on today. Amen? When you're found, if you say amen. Amen. And let us read it together. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he has on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put thou hand now and forth and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thy hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And verse 20 and 21 says, Then Job arose and rent his mantle, and shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground and worshipped, and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Thank you so much for the hearing and reading of God's holy word. And on today, I would have a few moments, but it might be over a little few. But we want to look at it from the day of handling. Point to yourself, handling my storm within a storm. And look at your neighbor and say, Neighbor, you can also handle your storm within a storm. Thank you so much for the ministers and to the mothers and to deacons and all of you that's here. God is good. And he is good all of the time. A storm within a storm. When we look at this subject, those words to me, does not sound like a pleasing situation to be in. Listen to it again. A storm within a storm. For a storm usually says to us, when it deals with nature, it describes not just rain, but it describes a violent disturbance of the atmosphere, which usually produces not just wind, but strong winds. Not just rain, but rain that floods. Not just lightning, but lightning that destroys. Not just snow, but snow drifts so high we can't get snow that causes roofs to cave in. And so it says that when we talk about storms, from the nature perspective, it is not something good that we won't encounter. And when we talk about storms with people, it usually describes their attitude or reaction or their character, because it says that it is a reaction, it is an uproar, it is a controversy. Y'all seen it? Violent outbursts or outbreak of the expression. not much control a storm. When we think about storms in our personal lives, it says that the normal, peaceful day is not there. Our activities have been interrupted with pain, with trouble, with affliction, with hurt, with sorrow, with headaches, heartaches. And I'm sure that most of us in here, and remember I didn't say you, I said us, can identify with a few of those storms in our life. A storm within a storm says before one storm is over, another storm has already, not forming, but another storm has already arrived. A storm within a storm. Now something clearly says our. And so it makes it personal, not somebody else is just having those storms within a storm, but many of us can probably say we've had storms within storms in our life. As we look at this book of Job, in some ways this book of Job, and especially when it picks up with this part of his life after the conversation with God, we can say that this is a story about how Job handled a storm within a storm in his life. Because one of the things that we many times when we associate and we talk about Job, the first thing we go to talking about is Job got double for his trouble. But tell your neighbor, it much took place before that 42nd chapter of Job. The storms that Job dealt with really are the same storm that we will encounter. Storms, and storms. It deals with the three most precious things in our lives beside God. Our families, our friends, our materialistic possessions, our money, our cars, houses, and then it deals with our health. Anybody here with me? Those are the three that no matter which order you put them, that we value the most beside of God. Our health, our possession, our family is very important. I heard Sister Bentley already said that her grandbaby, if it hadn't been just her grandbaby, she probably said, I can't go through all this. But for family, we go outside the box. My wife and her sister have been here to Little Rock. A sister right above, for many of you know, was called home to be with God a few years ago, and her oldest child, we call him Peppy, 2 children are being baptized today. And because of family, they didn't think it was far-fetched to make a trip over to Little Rock to be with them since their grandmother could not be there. Because God has called her home. So the storms of storms deals with our most precious things in our life. And I believe this could be described as Job will encounter low points in all 3 of these areas. Matter of fact, not just low points, but tell your neighbor the pits. He'll find it's a pits with his materialistic possession. He'll find it at the bottom of the pits with his family, with the bottom of the pits with his health. And so how does he handle this? I want to look at this book because I believe that we can glean some information on how Job handled this storm within a storm. Because many of us can identify with Job, how problems come. Y'all ever had them come and seem like they forgot everybody else address but yours? Anybody that with me, they got there and they, so you like guests to come. But after a while, you got to go to bed, you got to rest. But problems have stopped by our home. And some we have been at times misinformed about trouble. Because this prosperity ministry have got some of you messed up. Because you believe that trouble should not ever stop by your door. And they use scripture to go through, to make their argument. And one is that some of us have got it mixed up. Because the third, John 3. Not John 3 and 16, the epistle of John. The third epistle of John, chapter 1, verse 2 said, Beloved, I wish above all things that they may prosper and be in health. Above all things, I wish that thou would prosper and be in good health, even as thy soul prosper. And we have taken that scripture and make it seem that God is saying that he wants all of us to be in good health and he wants all of us to prosper. But look at this verse. Look at this book. These first 8 verses of this third epistle of John, John was addressing one of the co-laborers in the gospel, Gaius, his beloved friend. And many believe that this man was suffering from some illness or disease, and John wanted him to know that he was concerned about his health. Because he was going to encounter some problem, he was encountering some health issues. And so John said, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper. Didn't have much money? And be in health. Now listen to what he said. Even as thy soul prosper. They fix your soul fixed up. But I want you materialistically to be there. And also I want your health to be there. But it did not say we would not have some trouble. I know y'all got quiet because that said that God said that all of us go prosperous and be in good health. That's not what that said. Go look it up. I know y'all will get quiet on that one. I said, God, don't make me tell them. But he didn't say everybody. So he said that I know you're already sick, but I'm asking God to make you prosper and then that you be in good health. For Job said that he knew that every day would not be a sunshiny day. Y'all know this one by heart, don't you? 14th chapter of John, verse 1 says, a few of us. No, it didn't even start like that. It said, man, it said all of us, that is born of a woman, is a, how many? How many? I know you might not want to say it because you know your few days is behind. And so you already in your few days, right? Is a few days and what? A little trouble, right? Full of trouble. And Jesus said in John 16 and 33, when he was getting ready to go, he says that in the world you shall have tribulation. And so I don't want us to get the notion that every day is going to be a sunshiny day. Because one of the things we do, even as ministers sometimes, we deceive you. And if I've been guilty of it, I ask you to forgive me. Because sometimes we say that when you accept Christ, everything going to be all right. But that's not what Jesus said. But he said you're going to have some trouble, some tribulation. Now, when you accept Jesus, everything will be fine for as you get to the other side. But you will, on this side, have some tribulation. And the Greek word, this Greek word for tribulation is also translated affliction. Also translated trouble. Also translated anguish. Also translated persecution and burden. So they use this same word to describe what Jesus said, tribulation. So he said that you're going to have some trouble. You're going to have some heartache. You're going to have some burden. But he didn't stop there. And so this is what we ought to join. He said, but be of... Tell your neighbor, y'all done got quiet on it. So, but tell them again. Somebody kind of, went through cheerleaders that, see, Hebrews 10, and we read it in our text today, in our come together scripture, on one accord, it said when we come together, we don't come together just look at each other, but we come together to exhort one another. And so tell your neighbor, he said we're going to have tribulation, but be of. Y'all ain't got it. Be of. Can I get somebody that just don't mind shouting hallelujah, said be of. Good cheer. Why won't we have good cheer? Because he said, I've already overcome. I've already faced the problem that you're going to face. So you can shout hallelujah. So he said, be of good cheer. I've overcome. And so he tells us that trouble will come. But the good news is that we can look back and see how Job handled his storm within a storm. And it may help us in our storm. For Job did not allow what Satan wanted to happen in his life and also for us to happen in our life. Satan wants you to become distracted or detached from God. He wants you to doubt God. He wants you to curse God. He wants you to give up on God. Because he understands when you do that, he got you out there all by yourself. And how many know you can't handle this by yourself? But that's what he wants you to do. And so he said that, listen, so the question is, who was this Job, as we kind of get back and hurry along? Who was this Job? And what storm within a storm did he encounter? Y'all got your eyes on verse 1? For the ones that knew, don't close your Bible. Verse 1 says something. It tells us a little bit about Job. It said that was a man. You know about him? It tells you where he was from the land of Uz. Whose name was what? Job. And that's not Job. Tell your neighbor, say his name was. And that man was. And that feared God and what? Ensured evil. In other words, he stayed away from evil. He was a righteous man. He did what was pleasing to God. And we learned in verse 2 and 3 that he had a family. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. But we also learned that Job was not poor. Job was, don't say it out, but he was very rich. Very, very, very rich. And so I thought I'd stop right there. So you don't have to be poor to serve God. Y'all with me? And so when somebody go get jealous of what God has blessed you with, don't fan it in their face, but just tell God, God, give them the wisdom to understand that you got more blessings than what you've given me. And so he was hurt. First thing we learned about Job's storm is, first point, God knows all about us. I know y'all get quiet on that one. Not only does he know all about you, look at Ester and say he knows all about you too, Ester. And not only does he know all about us, nothing can happen without God's knowledge and approval. Say nothing can happen without God's knowledge and approval. In other words, that's a big statement. Because whatever happens, God knows about it. And he had to approve it. If you don't believe me, let's look at this. These storms, last point on that one, there's 3 little thoughts in this I want to give on this first, is these storms that Job was facing, or the storms that we face, could be. Now we already know about Job, and I really said about Job, it could be. Not always, because sometimes we call our storms on ourselves. But they could be a special assignment from God. How many Daniels are in the Bible? How many lions then do you hear about? How many Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? So God had special assignments for special people. So when the storms come, instead of cursing God, when you look at the bigger picture, you ought to tell God, thank you for using me to be a help to somebody else. For how many of you have endured because you found out that if God could deliver Daniel out the lion den, he could get you out of yours. Y'all got quiet on me. So what he's saying is, instead of cursing me, you really ought to be thanking me for your loved one. And so verse 6 says that it was a conversation. Verse 6 begins a conversation that took place with God and Satan. And listen, and I think we'll answer all three of these points. No, God knows all about us. And that can happen without God and his approval. But y'all got your eyes on verse 6. Verse 6 talks about the conversation that started with Satan and God. But verse 7, listen to verse 7. For God asked Satan a question. I'm going to do it from the New Living Translation. Where have you come from? The Lord said. And don't believe me, Satan is willing to answer. And Satan answered, Lord, I have been patrolling the earth. And y'all know what patrol do. They look. Because some of y'all got them in your neighborhood. And the police, when they patrol, and you don't want to expect them to come up there and catch him sleep in the car. You expect him to be looking out, making sure that he knows what's going on. And he said, I've been patrolling the earth. So that lets you know he's up there with God now, but that one way he's always been. He's making sure that he knows, Satan knows what's going on the earth. Is that on your Bible? He said, watching everything that's going on. In other words, Satan's eyes is on us. And we must understand Satan is not looking, not just taking a stroll in the park to smell the roses. He's not just trying to see the pretty nature that God has produced. He's not trying to see if you're 5'9" or 6'3". Satan has another mission. And God knows his mission, but Peter told us in 1 Peter 5 and 8, because he warns us about Satan. Because he says some of us get sleepy and lay down on the job, but Satan never sleeps nor slumbers. He's always busy. You know, when we go to sleep at night, and we think everything is peaceful, Satan is working his mind, trying to see how he's going to cause some confusion in your life. Listen at what 1 Peter 5 and 8 said. Peter said, be sober. That's alert. Be vigilant, because your adversary, that's what we're talking about now, the devil, and the roaring lion. And the roaring lion, not saying these people, walking about seeing who he may devour. Point at yourself, tell your neighbor, that means me. He's trying to destroy me. He's trying to get me to curse God. And listen to how God responds to Satan's wish to cause storm in Job and also our life. Job, Satan understood where his power was. The problem is that many of us don't understand. Job understood that that all Job had, it was because God had blessed him with it. And some of you don't understand that all you have is not because of that little job that you work in, but it's because of God's blessings that he has thrown upon you. And so listen to how he gets permission from the Lord, because y'all got your eyes on verse 8? Verse 8 says, reading from the New Living Translation, then the Lord asked Satan. And it's kind of strange that verse 7 talks about Satan telling God, I've been patrolling, I've been going to and fro. And Satan, God does not seem like he even deals with what Satan was talking about. And his question is, y'all see it? Have you noticed my servant? Notice Satan never called Job's name. He never said, I would like to talk to Job. I would like permission to go and see the boy. He never said that. But notice I said it could be a special assignment because God brings Job's name up. Y'all with me? Because he knew what Satan was doing. Satan was trying to find somebody he could destroy. He said, I got a good faithful member over there. You know, we always talk about God, I'm ready to serve. But sometimes we want to make our service like we want it. But tell your neighbor, that's not how God works. So listen to what he said. Then the Lord said, asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. I'm reading from the New Living Translation now. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. Satan told Job, told God, yeah, you're right. But he's really not faithful. Because it's all about the blessings you have given him. You've given him the riches, everything his hand touches. You blessed him. But if you would just take away his materialistic gain, you will find the true Job. And I thought about this when I was saying, they said, you remember, some of you that's older, that's been in Memphis, you remember when Firestone closed up? Some of the marriages evaporated, a few uncommitted, an international harvester. And so it wasn't about, the relationship must not have been about love. It must have been about, so Satan wasn't lying. Everybody that said they with you always ain't with you till, some of them buddies that you had, as long as you had the bottle full. Man, where we going next? As long as you had the car with the gas. You with me, play? As long as you had the car with the gas, they were with you. But when you told, man, my mom didn't give me no gas, well, I'll see you later. Well, this is really what Satan is charging St. Job is like. He said that if you take away that house that you've given, I know you're bragging about now, where you live at? I live in a new part of. And I got some, you do? Yeah. I got this many, my garage, it used to be a 3-car, but we had to move to, my bank account, I don't have to worry about writing checks or looking at my balance because my bank account is so full. I can do what I want. And that's really what Job was saying, Satan was saying about Job. He said, but if you take this away, you will find out that his faithfulness is not truly in his heart about you, but his faithfulness is in his materialistic gain. Y'all got your eyes on verse 11. Let's keep on walking through it. But God says to Job, Satan says to God, but reach out and take away everything. Read from the New Living Translation again. He tells God, but reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you, not behind your back. He don't do it to your face. And I know we're kind of laughing, but how many of you, when you didn't get the job that you wanted, when your loved one went home to be with glory, that you cursed God? Or maybe you didn't curse him, but you wasn't so happy with the outcome. And I've not been happy all the time with God either. But I've come to the knowledge to know and understand that when I take time and look back, that God is in control. That God knows so much better than I know. That's why his ways are not mine. And his thoughts are not, matter of fact, they're so far above me. It's just like me talking to or somebody trying to talk to me, or talking to one of them people that know think they know everything, right? Or somebody telling me to go in and put together this computer and I don't know what it is. Y'all with me? And so listen to what it says. And so God says in verse 12, y'all got your eyes on it? All right, you may test him. The Lord said to Satan. So remember, there's a permission. Satan said that you got a hedge around him. I can't get to it. So tell your neighbor, we special. Remember, I said that Satan has to get permission from God. And so he said, do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically. So Satan left. And so God's good thing is, or the thing we talked about is that God knows about the storm before they happen. And he knew Satan's tricks or his ploy. Because remember, he recommended Job to Satan. And so we do learn that Satan was righteous. And that informs us that the righteous also, I know y'all didn't want to say that, but tell your neighbor that the righteous also, in other words, none of us are exempt. You remember when Jesus healed before he healed the boy that was born blind, the man that was born blind, he told the disciples, when the disciples had who sinned, him and mother, Jesus said, neither. as his parents sinned, that he was born blind. Jesus said that he was born so that the works of the God should be made manifest. Second point is we want to make sure you get it. First of all, God knows it all. Tell him he knows every move we'll make. But sadly, tell your neighbor, Satan got his eye on us too. Secondly, is the storms of life may appear quick and severe. Tell your neighbor, quick and severe. Quick and severe. Let's look at this thing. We're gonna get ready to get out of it. One more point after this. Job is now praying for his children, doing his regular duties, makes his sacrifices. He's now probably reclining a little bit. But listen, as Job received some breaking news. The storm within the storm showed up. And some of you can probably witness, because on March the 4th, around 10:30 p.m., I was in my study and the phone rang, and the storm started to brew in our life concerning our grandson. Never had a seizure before, but my wife came and said, Shakita said, Jay says that a storm comes up least when you expect it. So verse 15 says that Job get the word that his cows had been killed and all of the farmland. Well, that's kind of bad, but he said, well, we'll see what we can do about it tomorrow. But before he settles down, verse 16 tells us the lightning struck from heaven and killed all the sheep and all the shepherds. Well, he said, well, that's kind of bad, but I still got my camels. And he said, but I can maybe sell some of them and buy some more cows and buy some more sheep. But before he could get that figured out, another servant stopped by and said, Job, I need to inform you that the Chaldeans raided our camp and have stolen all of your camels and killed all of the servants. Well, he said, well, that's bad enough. So now I'll have to figure out how I'll have to go tell my children, but how much. See, and this is one of the things we have to kind of do when it's really kind of hard with us, that we have developed a way of life. That the children was able to do some things. Matter of fact, they were together then, either partying or doing some things that was a little bit above what everybody else would do. And so he said, but now I got to go tell my children that we won't be able to eat at the fancy restaurants no more. They won't be able to drive the Lexuses no more. They might have a car, but it'll be a Volkswagen or one of them low-end Fords. But before he could figure out how he was going to tell them that they couldn't do what they were doing, the news knocked and said, Job, you don't have to worry about telling them that they won't be able to get the Bentley, that they're going to have to get the Mustang, because there's no need. Then you won't need the Mustang either. Because all of your children are, that's some heavy stuff, isn't it? And he said, don't worry about calling the doctor, because the doctor cannot help. And the servants, don't worry about calling the servant to go see about getting your camel back, because all of the servants are dead beside the Ford that delivered the bad news. And so these messages, these storms, come even in our life. And the question is, how will Job handle this storm within a storm? Because how he handles it might help us as we handle some of our storm within a storm. Tell your neighbor, God knows everything that happened. God gave him permission, but now he has a storm in his life, and we are not concerned about that. That point is that God gave him the permission. But the question is, how will Job handle this storm? Tell your neighbor, he did like we do. He grieved, but he also worshiped God. Tell your neighbor, he grieved. He grieved, but he also worshiped God. Because there's nothing wrong with grieving. Let's look at it in our text, and we're going to bid you farewell. Give me 5 minutes, and we're going to get out of here. He grieved, but listen to verse 20. Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head. He grieved, y'all. He was hurting, y'all. He was hurting. But he didn't allow his hurt to cause him to do something that was ungodly. Because we learned that he did not, even in the midst of his hurting, he did not curse God. We learned that in the midst of his hurting, he did not turn but he ran to God. And so it always amazes to me when trouble happens in our lives, we do everything but come to church. We do everything but call on the name of God. Well, if we say God is an awesome God, why don't we try to find him and see if he's awesome as he says? But we stay away from him, and when we stay away from him, everyone gets to us but God. But look at what Job did. Job grieved, but Job also worshiped God. He was saying that God he was reverencing God. He understood that God is sovereign. He understood that God's power supersedes the power of Satan. He understood that all he had before it was gone came from God. He understood, just like Satan understood, that the cows that he had, the cattle that he had, the 10 children that he had, they was all blessings from God. Tell your neighbor, all you got. You might not want to tell it, but it is a blessing from God. And because it was a blessing from God, he did not run from God in the midst of his trouble. He ran. How I know he ran to him? Because it said that he bowed down, worshiping, he bowed down on his knees. Listen to what he said in verse 21, and I'm going to bid you farewell. And he said, and naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave me all that I had. I didn't get it on my own, because if it hadn't been for God on my side, I wouldn't have had my 10 children. I wouldn't have had the cattle on 1,000 hills. I wouldn't have had the camel. I wouldn't have had the money that I had. But it was all because of God. So he said, the Lord give it, and the Lord has taken away. But God really didn't take it away. Satan took it away. God allowed Satan to have his way. And he said, the Lord gave and the Lord take it away. But look at what he said. Even in the midst of his trouble, he said, blessed be the name of the Lord. And how many of you can run to God instead of running from God in the time of trouble? He was reminded that God had taken care of him in the past. And tell your neighbor, if he did it then, he's able to do it all over again. And we too can be like Job and call on God when the storms of life are raging. I like that song. They used to sing it when I was a little boy down at Lake Grove. And some things that worked then, they still work now. How do you know that God is? God is. When the storms of life are raging, God will stand back. Anybody know it with me? It says that God will stand back. In other words, you don't have to stand there by your own. For God will stand with us and for us. And when we face the storms of eternal doom, and all of us was on our way to hell, God loved us so much that he sent his only begotten son Jesus to rescue us from the penalty of sin. He did that when he went out on Calvary, paid our sin debt, was put in fire grave. But the news is that early on the third day morning, he got up with all power. And that's some good news and reason I want to close with that, because he got up with power to get you out of whatever storm that you're in. He might not take us out of every storm, but he'll be with us in the midst of the storm. And that's why Job said, in the midst of the storm, he said that my God, my lily of the valley, my bright and morning star, he said, blessed be the name of the Lord. And so I was wondering, Job, how can you sit there and tell within a storm when you lost all that you had, how can you sit there and say, blessed be the name of the Lord? He said, well, if you know what I know, if you look back over your life, I know you haven't lived long as I had at that time, but if you look back over the 58 plus years that God had brought you through, if you remember when your mama was holding you on Latham, when they didn't know what was wrong with you, they didn't know if you were going to live or die, it was God that brought you through. You remember when you turned over in the Mississippi River, when you should have been out there in a 14-foot, flat-foot bottom, it was not a look, and your mother-in-law made you straighten it out. When you say, I was looked out when I sit on the gas tank, she reminded you it wasn't luck, but it was a blessing of God. And just like you there are others that got blessings that God has done in their life, have got them to this point. And if God did it then, tell your neighbor he's able to do it again. So instead of running from God when storms come in our life, we ought to do like Job and run to went down and called on God. How many of you know you can call on God? Whatever you need. I think the children sang a song that you can call on the 911 and the line is. You can call for the Father, for the Son, and for the Holy Ghost. And all I leave you with this. Whenever trouble come in your life, when a storm, within a storm comes, don't run from God.